Hashtag from the stars came the Deathworlders. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 47 species gathered around the crystalline table. Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Collective tapped his 6 claws against the surface, creating a rhythmic clicking that echoed through the vast dome. His translator collar hummed as it processed the countless conversations happening simultaneously. Order! Order! Called Supreme Chancellor Vexthal, her bioluminescent patterns flashing in agitation. The jellyfish-like being floated above her designated spot, tentacles writhing with barely contained panic. We have received disturbing reports from the Outer Rim territories. The chatter died down as holographic displays materialized above the table, showing star charts and sensor readings. Red markers indicated systems that had gone dark over the past few cycles. The pattern was unmistakable. Something was moving through their space with methodical precision. Kethvar leaned forward, his reptilian features creasing with concern. 17 mining colonies gone silent. No distress calls, no debris fields, nothing. Whatever did this left no trace behind. His species had been spacefaring for over 3,000 years, and they had never encountered anything like this. Ambassador Tichweses of the Crystalline Hegemony chimed in, their voice like whined through glass caves. Our deep space sensors detected massive gravitational anomalies before each disappearance. Ships the size of small moons, moving faster than anything in our databases. A collective shudder ran through the assembly. The various species represented here had dominated their corner of the galaxy for millennia. They had dealt with Rouge AI networks, parasitic hive minds, and dimensional incursions. But this felt different. This felt like something beyond their understanding. Have we attempted communication? Asked Dr. Zolwan, the insectoid scientist whose compound eyes reflected the holographic displays. Her mandibles clicked nervously as she spoke. 17 attempts across all known frequency ranges, replied the Chancellor. Nothing. Not even acknowledgement of our transmissions. Either they cannot understand us, or they simply do not care to respond. The truth was far more terrifying than they realized. In the depths of space, beyond their furthest sensor networks, a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen continued its steady advance. The ships were indeed massive, kilometer-long wedges of dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But it was not their size that made them truly frightening. Aboard the lead vessel, Commander Sarachon stood before a tactical display showing their progress through this new galaxy. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her uniform bore the insignia of the United Earth Defense Force. Behind her, dozens of officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. Navigation. What's our ETA to the next system? She asked without turning around. 18 hours at current velocity, Commander, replied Lieutenant Torres. Long-range sensors show significant industrial activity. Looks like another mining operation. She nodded thoughtfully. They've been traveling for over 2 years since leaving their home galaxy, following ancient star maps discovered in the ruins on Kepler 442b. The maps had promised a galaxy rich with resources and ripe for colonization. What they had found instead was a thriving civilization that seemed to span hundreds of systems. Any signs of military resistance in the previous systems? She asked. Negative, ma'am. Whatever defenses they had were minimal. Mostly automated mining platforms and cargo haulers. No warships to speak of. This puzzled Chun. In her experience, any civilization advanced enough for interstellar mining would have significant military capabilities. The human colonial wars had taught them that space was a dangerous place, and only the strong survived to claim the stars. Sir, called out Ensign Park from the communication station. We're receiving another transmission. Same as before, multiple frequency bands, repeating pattern. Seems like they're trying to talk. Shin walked over to examine the signal patterns on Park's screen. The mathematical sequences were elegant, clearly indicating intelligence, but the underlying language structure was completely alien to human understanding. Any luck with the translation protocols? The AI is working on it, but these linguistic patterns are unlike anything in our databases. It's as if they evolved from completely different conceptual frameworks. Of course they did, Chun thought. Humanity had only encountered one other intelligent species in their home galaxy, and that first contact had not gone well. The arthropods of Vega Prime had been peaceful traders, eager to share knowledge and establish cultural exchange. Humanity had responded by studying their technology, reverse engineering their FTL drives, and then systematically exterminating them to claim their worlds. It had been a dark chapter in human history, but it had also been necessary. Earth population had reached 15 billion, and the home system's resources were depleted. Expansion had not been a choice. It had been survival. Commander, interrupted Lieutenant Commander Jackson from the Strategic Planning Station. I've been analyzing the distribution of these mining colonies. They're not random. There's a clear pattern here. Chun moved to Jackson Station, where a three-dimensional map showed the positions of all the systems they had encountered. Red dots marked the colonies they had already claimed, while blue dots indicated upcoming targets. They're following the richest asteroid belts and nebular formations, Jackson continued. These aliens have been cherry-picking the most resource-dense systems in this spiral arm. Some of these deposits are worth more than entire star systems back home. A slow smile spread across Chen's face. This was even better than they had hoped. Not only had they found a galaxy ripe for colonization, but their new neighbors had already done the hard work of identifying the most valuable resources. What about defensive capabilities? She asked. Minimal, as far as we can tell. We've analyzed debris from their mining platforms. Their material science is actually quite advanced. Some of their alloys are superior to ours. But their weapons technology appears to be centuries behind. Mostly plasma cutters and mining charges, nothing military grade. This made sense to Chun. If these aliens had never encountered serious military opposition, they would have no reason to develop advanced weapons. Humanity, on the other hand, had been forged in the fires of constant warfare. Every human ship was designed from the ground up for combat efficiency. Sir, called out the sensor operator. We're picking up increased chatter from the inner systems. Looks like they know we're coming. Chun returned to the main display, watching as communication signals flowed between the various alien colonies like a nervous system responding to injury. Whatever these creatures were, they were smart enough to coordinate their responses. But intelligence without the will to fight was just another form of weakness. Signal the fleet, she ordered. Maintain current course and speed, and prepare the standard colonization protocols. The bridge crew acknowledged her orders with crisp efficiency. They all knew what the protocols entailed. Any resistance would be met with overwhelming force. Any survivors would be studied, cataloged, and ultimately disposed of once their usefulness had ended. As the human fleet continued its inexorable advance, the aliens they were approaching had no idea what was coming their way. They lived in a galaxy where conflicts were resolved through negotiation and resource disputes were settled by the Council. The concept of total warfare was as foreign to them as their peaceful intentions were to humanity. In the Council chambers, the debates continued. Some argued for immediate evacuation of the Outer Rim territories. Others suggested sending a massive diplomatic mission to establish contact with these mysterious newcomers. A few radical voices even proposed mobilizing their small defense fleets, though most dismissed this as unnecessary aggression. None of them understood that they were about to encounter a species for whom war was not just an option. It was a way of life. Humanity had clawed its way out of a gravity well that had tried to kill them at every step. They had survived ice ages, plagues, and the constant threat of extinction. They had turned their own world into a testing ground for every possible form of warfare, and then they had taken those lessons to the stars. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world in the cosmic database. More importantly, they were about to discover what happened when a species evolved on such a world finally reached the stars. The countdown to first contact had begun, and neither side was prepared for what was coming. Hashtag from the stars came the Deathworlders. The mining platform Zefkar 7 drifted peacefully through the asteroid field, its massive collection arrays slowly rotating as they gathered precious metals from the rocky debris. Chief Engineer Veltar monitored the operation from the Central Command Dome, his 4 eyes tracking multiple data streams simultaneously. Everything was proceeding according to schedule. The monthly quota would be met 3 days ahead of deadline. A soft chime from the communication console interrupted his satisfaction. Chief, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Inner Council. Emergency frequency. Veltar's neck frills darkened with concern as he activated the message. Chancellor Vexthal's image materialized in the air before him, her bioluminescent patterns flashing in rapid, agitated sequences. All Outer Rim stations are ordered to implement Evacuation Protocol 7 immediately. Unknown hostile forces are approaching your sector. This is not a drill. Abandon all non-essential operations and retreat to the inner systems. The message lasted only 30 seconds, but it sent shockwaves through the mining platform. In over 800 years of operation, Zefkar 7 had never received an evacuation order. Even during the trade wars with the hegemony, operations had continued without interruption. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked Communications Officer Teatress Cell, her crystalline body refracting the emergency lighting into rainbow patterns. Veltar's mind raced through the possibilities. The platform housed over 12,000 workers from 6 different species. Evacuation would take at least 40 hours, and they would have to abandon equipment worth billions of credits. But the Chancellor had seemed genuinely terrified, and that was not a emotion he had ever seen from the normally composed leader. "Begin Phase 1 evacuation protocols," he ordered. "Priority personnel to the transport base. Send out emergency signals to all mining crews in the field. And raise our sensor array to maximum sensitivity. I want to know what's coming." Across the asteroid field, similar scenes played out on dozens of platforms and mining ships. The Galactic Council's warning had spread like wildfire through the communication networks, and panic was beginning to set in. Most of the workers had never seen real danger in their lives. Their civilization had evolved past the need for conflict, and the idea of hostile aliens was almost incomprehensible. But as the hours passed, their long-range sensors began picking up something that made even the most optimistic among them reconsider their assumptions about the universe. Sensor technician Kral Vaughn stared at his display in disbelief. "Chief, you need to see this. Whatever's coming our way, it's massive." Veltar hurried to the sensor station, where a three-dimensional projection showed the approaching objects. At first glance, they looked like asteroids, dark, irregularly shaped masses drifting through space. But the computer analysis revealed something far more disturbing. "These aren't natural objects," Kralvon whispered. "The sensor computer classifies them as artificial constructs, but they're moving in perfect formation. And, Chief, there are hundreds of them. The largest objects measured over a kilometer in length, while smaller craft surrounded them like predatory fish circling their prey. The entire formation moved with mechanical precision, maintaining exact distances and vectors as they approached the mining operation." "How long until they reach us?" Veltar asked, though he dreaded the answer. "At current velocity, 14 hours. Veltar's decision crystallized instantly. Whatever these things were, they were clearly not interested in peaceful contact. The evacuation could not wait for proper protocols and careful preparation. "All hands, abandon station immediately. This is a general evacuation order. Proceed to the nearest transport and prepare for emergency departure. Leave everything non-essential." Throughout the platform, workers dropped their tools and rushed toward the transport base. The orderly evacuation quickly devolved into barely controlled chaos as news of the approaching fleet spread. Loading protocols were abandoned in favor of cramming as many people as possible into each ship. Dr. Zerman, the platform's chief xenobiologist, clutched a small data core containing decades of research as she boarded Transport 7. Around her, workers from a dozen species pressed together, their usual social hierarchies forgotten in the face of unknown danger. "Has anyone identified what kind of species we're dealing with?" she asked the transport's captain. Captain HYSS Tell, a veteran pilot with over 2 centuries of experience, checked his instruments nervously. "Nobody knows for sure, Doctor, but the energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. Whatever built those ships, they're using technology we've never seen before." As the transports began lifting off from the platform, their passengers caught their first glimpse of the approaching fleet through the observation windows. Even at extreme distance, the alien ships were visible as dark spots against the starfield, growing larger with each passing minute. "By the Ancient Ones," whispered one of the engineers. "How many of them are there?" The answer came from the transport's long-range sensors. "Over 300 individual contacts, arranged in a complex formation that spoke of military precision. This was not an exploration fleet or a trading mission. This was an invasion force. But the true horror was yet to be revealed. As the evacuation fleet jumped to FDL and disappeared into hyperspace, the human ships finally came into clear sensor range. The mining platform's automated systems, still functioning despite the evacuation, recorded every detail of what happened next. Commander Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching as the alien mining platform came into view on the main screen. The structure was elegant in its simplicity, flowing curves and organic shapes that suggested a civilization more concerned with aesthetics than military efficiency. It was also completely defenseless. "Any signs of resistance?" she asked. "Negative, ma'am. Looks like they evacuated when they detected our approach." "Smart move." Chen nodded approvingly. Intelligence was always preferable to pointless heroics. Dead aliens could not provide useful information about their civilization's capabilities and weaknesses. "Deploy the boarding teams. I want a complete technical analysis of their systems. And see if you can recover their computer databases. I need to know more about the strategic situation in this sector." The alien platform was a treasure trove of information. The boarding teams discovered manufacturing techniques that were centuries ahead of human capabilities, materials that could revolutionize ship construction, and computer systems that operated on principles human scientists had only theorized about. But it was the cultural data that proved most illuminating. The aliens' records painted a picture of a civilization that had never known true warfare. Their conflicts were economic disputes resolved through negotiation. Their military consisted of lightly armed patrol ships designed to deal with pirates and asteroid impacts, not invasion fleets. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, reviewed the findings with growing amazement. "Commander, these beings have achieved what we always claimed to want, a truly peaceful civilization spanning multiple star systems. They've eliminated poverty, war, and resource scarcity." Chun studied the reports with professional detachment. How did they accomplish this without conquest? Cooperation. Resource sharing. They've developed technologies that make scarcity obsolete. Look at this energy generation system. It's 90% more efficient than our best fusion reactors. This was exactly what humanity needed. The energy crisis that had driven their exodus from the home galaxy could be solved with alien technology. The resource shortages that had sparked the colonial wars could become a thing of the past. "Excellent work, Doctor. Prepare a full technical report. I want our engineers to begin reverse engineering these systems immediately." But Chen's satisfaction was tempered by strategic concern. A civilization this advanced, even if peaceful, represented a potential threat to human expansion. Their technology could not be allowed to fall into the hands of potential rivals. And their territories contained exactly the resources humanity needed for its growing colonies. "Sir," interrupted Lieutenant Torres, "we're receiving transmissions from multiple sources across the system. Looks like word of our arrival is spreading." Chen moved to the communication station, where the displays showed a complex web of signals flowing between various alien installations. The mathematical patterns were becoming clearer as the ship's AI worked to decode their language. But the emotional content was unmistakable. Fear, confusion, desperate calls for help that would never be answered in time. "Commander," called out the tactical officer, "we're detecting movement from the inner system. Looks like they're mobilizing some kind of response." On the strategic display, dozens of small contacts were accelerating toward their position. The computer analysis identified them as lightly armed vessels, the alien equivalent of patrol boats and system defense ships. Chen almost smiled. If this was the best response their enemy could muster, the conquest of this sector would be even easier than anticipated. Human warships were designed to fight other humans, who had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing each other. These peaceful aliens were about to learn the difference between civilization and survival. Signal the fleet. Implement battle formation Delta. Any ship that approaches within weapons range is to be considered hostile and destroyed. The alien defenders had no idea what they were flying into. Captain Thelvass of the patrol ship Azure Wing led a squadron of 8 vessels toward the unknown intruders, determined to protect the evacuation convoys streaming away from the Outer Rim. His ship carried enough firepower to disable a pirate cruiser or deflect an asteroid from a collision course. Against human military technology, it might as well have been armed with harsh language. The Azure Wing never even managed to get within firing range. The human fleet's point defense systems detected the approaching ships and classified them as incoming missiles. Automated targeting systems locked onto their drive signatures and fired without waiting for human authorization. In less than 3 minutes, 8 brave aliens and their crews were reduced to expanding clouds of plasma and debris. They died so quickly that they never had time to realize how completely outmatched they had been. Shin watched the tactical display with professional interest as the alien contacts simply disappeared. Efficient. What's our ammunition expenditure? Minimal, ma'am. The point defense systems used less than 1% of their magazine capacity. This was the fundamental difference between their civilizations. The aliens had built ships to explore and gather resources. Humans had built ships to fight and win wars. The outcome had been inevitable from the moment the two species encountered each other. Set course for the next system on the target list, Chun ordered, and prepare the colonization protocols. I want detailed surveys of every habitable world and resource depot in this sector. As the human fleet continued its advance, the survivors of the mining platform evacuation carried news of the encounter back to the inner systems. Their reports painted a picture of technologically superior aliens with weapons beyond their understanding and no apparent interest in communication or negotiation. The Galactic Council faced a crisis unlike anything in their recorded history. For the first time in millennia, their civilization was confronted with an enemy that could not be reasoned with, bargained with, or appeased. They were about to learn that the universe was a far more dangerous place than they had ever imagined. And in the depths of space, more human fleets were already plotting their next moves. The conquest of the galaxy had only just begun. Hashtag from the stars came the Deathworlders. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going for 72 hours without recess. Representatives from 47 species clustered around the crystalline table, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony that the translation systems struggled to process. Fear hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Supreme Chancellor Vex Thul floated above her position, her bioluminescent patterns cycling through every known expression of distress. The latest reports were spread before the assembly. Detailed sensor logs from the survivors of Zefkar 7 and tactical analysis from the Azure Wing's final transmission. Ambassador Kethvar spoke first, his voice hoarse from days of debate. We must accept the reality before us. These invaders possess military capabilities that exceed our own by several orders of magnitude. Our patrol fleets were destroyed without managing to fire a single shot. Dr. Zolwan's mandibles clicked nervously as she added her own analysis. The energy signatures from their weapons are unlike anything we've encountered. They're using some form of directed plasma that can punch through our strongest shields as if they were paper. This was the heart of the problem. The Galactic Confederation had spent millennia developing technologies for peace, trade, and exploration. Their weapons were designed to disable rather than destroy, to capture rather than kill. The concept of total warfare had been abandoned so long ago that most species had forgotten it ever existed. What do we know about their origins? Asked Ambassador THYSS, their crystalline form refracting the chamber's lights into nervous patterns. Chancellor Vex Thul activated a holographic display showing the path of destruction the aliens had carved through their territory. Intelligence analysis suggests they came from beyond our local galactic cluster. The trajectory of their advance indicates they originated from somewhere in the void sector, the empty space between our galaxy and the next spiral arm. The implications were staggering. If these aliens had traveled such an enormous distance, they possessed faster-than-light technology, far superior to anything the Confederation had developed. More disturbing still, it suggested they were not random raiders, but organized colonizers looking for new territory to claim. Have there been any attempts at communication since the initial encounters? Dr. Zolwan asked. 17 additional attempts across all known frequencies and mathematical frameworks, the Chancellor replied. They acknowledge our transmissions, but show no interest in dialogue. Their responses are limited to what our linguists interpret as territorial warnings. In truth, the human responses have been much simpler than the aliens realized. The standard colonial fleet protocol for dealing with native populations was straightforward. Establish superiority through overwhelming force, demand unconditional surrender, and eliminate any resistance. Communication was useful only for extracting strategic intelligence. Fleet Admiral Marcus Webb stood in the war room aboard the UES Dominator, studying the tactical displays that showed their advance through alien space. 3 months into the invasion, his forces had claimed 17 star systems and established forward bases on a dozen worlds. The operation was proceeding ahead of schedule. "Admiral, we're receiving updated intelligence from the reconnaissance squadrons," reported Captain Sarah Chun, recently promoted after her successful pacification of the Outer Rim territories. The alien government appears to be concentrating their remaining forces around 3 core systems. Webb examined the strategic map, noting the concentration of alien military assets around their most heavily populated worlds. The computer analysis indicated approximately 2,000 light vessels and several hundred larger craft. Impressive numbers, but hopelessly outclassed by human military technology. "What's the estimated time frame for completing sector pacification?" he asked. "If they continue to resist in their current manner, approximately 6 months for total system control. However, our xenological teams believe there's a significant possibility they'll attempt to negotiate once they realize the futility of military resistance." This was the pattern that had emerged throughout their advance. The aliens were intelligent enough to recognize superior force when they encountered it, but they seemed psychologically incapable of understanding that humanity was not interested in coexistence. Every human colony in their home galaxy had been built on the ruins of someone else's civilization. "Admiral," interrupted Commander Jackson from the intelligence station, "we're intercepting massive communication traffic from the enemy core systems. Looks like they're attempting to coordinate some kind of unified response." Webb moved to examine the intercepted transmissions. The mathematical patterns were becoming clearer as their AI systems learned to decode the alien languages, and what they revealed was both fascinating and amusing. The aliens were trying to organize their first military alliance in recorded history. Species that had never worked together militarily were attempting to coordinate defense strategies. It was like watching children play at war games, except the stakes were the survival of entire civilizations. "Sir, should we accelerate our advance to prevent them from organizing effectively?" Webb considered the option carefully. From a purely military perspective, it would be wise to strike before the enemy could coordinate their defenses. But from a strategic standpoint, allowing them to gather their forces in one location would make the final battle more efficient. Maintain current advance rate, he decided. Let them concentrate their forces. It will save us the trouble of hunting down scattered resistance groups later. The decision reflected humanity's confidence in their military superiority, but it also demonstrated something the aliens could never have understood. For humans, war was not just about victory. It was about complete domination. The final battle would serve as an example to any other civilizations that might consider resistance. Meanwhile, in the core systems of the Galactic Confederation, the largest military mobilization in their history was underway. Species that had competed economically for centuries were now sharing technology and resources in a desperate attempt to mount an effective defense. Admiral Theknor of the Zephyrian Navy found himself in command of the combined fleet, despite having spent most of his career managing trade route security. The irony was not lost on him. The most peaceful species in the galaxy were now looking to their weakest military tradition for salvation. "Admiral, the crystalline hegemony has agreed to share their shield enhancement technology," reported his aide, Commander Velshawn. "And the Hive Collective is providing computational support for tactical coordination." Theknor studied the fleet composition displays with growing concern. They had assembled nearly 3,000 ships, but most were converted civilian vessels with hastily installed weapons. The few purpose-built military ships were designed for police actions, not warfare against a technologically superior enemy. "What's the status of the evacuation protocols?" he asked. Approximately 40% of the civilian population from the Outer Rim territories has been relocated to the inner systems. "But, Admiral, we simply don't have enough transport capacity to evacuate everyone if our defenses fail." This was the nightmare scenario that kept Thek-Nor awake during his rest periods. If their improvised fleet could not stop the alien advance, billions of civilians would be left defenseless. The invaders had shown no interest in sparing non-combatants during their previous conquests. Any word from the diplomatic missions to the neutral systems? The Andromedans have agreed to provide sanctuary for refugees, but they refuse to offer military assistance. The Spiral Alliance is maintaining strict neutrality. Everyone is afraid that getting involved will make them the next target. Thek-Nor understood their reasoning, but it left the Confederation facing annihilation alone. In desperation, they had even attempted to contact other galaxies, hoping to find allies or at least warn other civilizations about the threat. But the distances involved made real-time communication impossible. Admiral called out the sensor operator. We're detecting movement from the enemy fleet. Multiple contacts breaking orbit from the captured worlds and assuming attack formation. The displays lit up with tactical information as the human fleet began its advance toward the core systems. The force composition was exactly what their intelligence had predicted. Approximately 100 heavy warships supported by 300 smaller escort vessels. By any mathematical analysis, the aliens should have overwhelming numerical superiority. But Thek-Nor had studied the sensor recordings from every previous engagement. He had seen what human weapons could do to their strongest ships. Numbers meant nothing when the enemy could destroy your entire fleet before you could get within firing range. Signal all ships to assume defensive formation around Nexus Prime, he ordered. If we're going to make a stand, we'll do it protecting our homeworld. The final battle was being set up exactly as Fleet Admiral Webb had hoped. The alien fleet was concentrating around their most important world, giving humanity the opportunity to eliminate their entire military capability in a single decisive engagement. It would be the largest space battle in galactic history, and its outcome would determine the fate of every species in the local cluster. But as the two fleets moved toward their inevitable confrontation, neither side fully understood what they were really fighting for. The aliens saw it as a struggle for survival against incomprehensible invaders. The humans viewed it as a necessary step in their species' expansion across the galaxy. The truth was far simpler and more terrible. This was evolution in action, natural selection playing out on a galactic scale. One species had been forged in the crucible of a death world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. The other had evolved in paradise, where cooperation and peaceful coexistence were not just possible, but necessary for survival. The universe was about to discover which approach produced the stronger civilization. As the fleets closed to within sensor range of each other, communication attempts continued from the alien side. They were still trying to find some way to avoid the coming slaughter, still believing that rational beings could find peaceful solutions to their conflicts. The humans responded with their own message, a simple broadcast in the mathematical language the aliens had been using. But instead of offering terms for negotiation, it was an ultimatum. Surrender unconditionally or face complete extermination. The message was received and understood by every ship in the alien fleet. For the first time in their history, the various species of the Galactic Confederation understood that they were facing an enemy that viewed their very existence as an obstacle to be removed. The age of innocence was over. The real war was about to begin. ## from the stars came the Deathworlders. The space around Nexus Prime had never seen so many ships in one location. Admiral Thek-Nor watched from the bridge of his flagship as the combined fleet of the Galactic Confederation took its final defensive positions. 3,000 vessels representing 47 different species created a protective sphere around their most precious world, the birthplace of their civilization and home to over 8 billion souls. All ships report ready, Admiral, announced Commander Velshan, though his voice carried none of the confidence such words should have conveyed. The crystalline hegemony's shield ships are in position. The Hive Collective's tactical networks are online. Long-range sensors show the enemy fleet will be within weapons range in 4 hours. Thek-Nor studied the tactical displays with the grim satisfaction of someone who had accepted an impossible situation. They were about to face humanity's finest warships with a collection of hastily armed civilian vessels and a handful of patrol boats. By every military doctrine ever developed, they should simply surrender and hope for mercy. But something had changed during the months of preparation. The various species of the Confederation had discovered something they had never possessed before, a common cause worth dying for. Reports from the conquered territories had made it clear that humans were not interested in coexistence or even slavery. They wanted complete extermination of all existing populations, followed by colonization by their own species. Any response to our final diplomatic transmission? Feknor asked, though he already knew the answer. Negative, sir. The humans acknowledge our messages, but continue to demand unconditional surrender followed by what their linguists describe as population processing. Our xenological teams believe this refers to systematic elimination. Dr. Zerman, the xenobiologist who had escaped from Zefkar 7, looked up from her analysis station. Admiral, I've been studying the human communication patterns and their tactical behavior. I think we've been making a fundamental error in our assumptions about their psychology. Explain. We've been treating them as a rational species that simply places a higher value on territorial expansion than we do. But their behavior suggests something far more disturbing. They appear to be incapable of long-term coexistence with other intelligent species. Every action they've taken indicates a pathological drive toward absolute dominance. This was closer to the truth than she realized. Humanity had evolved on a world where cooperation within the species was essential for survival, but competition between species was literally a matter of life and death. Earth's ecosystem had taught them that resources were always limited, and that allowing potential competitors to survive was the path to extinction. Feknor absorbed this information with growing dread. You're suggesting that negotiation is not just unlikely, it's impossible. I'm afraid so, Admiral. We're not dealing with a civilization that happens to be aggressive. We're facing a species that views our very existence as an existential threat. The implications rippled through the bridge crew. Every species in the Confederation had evolved on worlds where intelligence led naturally to cooperation and peaceful coexistence. The concept of a sapient species that was fundamentally incapable of sharing the galaxy was beyond their comprehension. Sir, interrupted the sensor operator. The enemy fleet is beginning to deploy into attack formation. Long-range analysis confirms our intelligence estimates. Approximately 400 vessels total, with energy signatures indicating massive destructive capability. Through the observation windows, the human fleet was becoming visible as a collection of dark shapes against the starfield. Even at extreme distance, their formation spoke of predatory intent and military precision. These were not explorers or traders who had been forced into conflict. These were purpose-built instruments of war. Fleet Admiral Webb stood on the bridge of the UES Dominator, reviewing the final tactical assessments before the attack commenced. The alien defensive formation was actually quite clever, with their various ship types positioned to maximize their collective advantages. Under different circumstances, he might have been impressed by their ingenuity. Admiral, all ships report ready for engagement, announced Captain Shun. The enemy appears to be attempting some kind of coordinated defense using overlapping shield networks and distributed firepower. Webb studied the tactical displays with professional interest. The aliens had clearly learned from their previous defeats and were attempting to adapt their limited military resources to counter human advantages. It was a commendable effort, but it was also futile. What's our assessment of their technological capabilities? He asked. Commander Harrison from the Intelligence Division pulled up detailed analysis screens. Their shield technology is actually superior to ours in terms of energy efficiency, but their power generation systems can't maintain high-intensity barriers for extended periods. Their weapons are primarily focused plasma systems designed for precision rather than raw destructive power. This perfectly exemplified the difference between their civilizations. Human weapons were designed to kill as efficiently as possible, with secondary considerations for precision or energy economy. The aliens had built tools for mining and construction that happened to be capable of inflicting damage. Sir, called out the communications officer. We're receiving another transmission from the enemy fleet. Same pattern as before, mathematical sequences followed by linguistic elements. The AI has achieved approximately 80% translation accuracy. Webb moved to the communications station, where the decoded message was displayed in clear text. The alien admiral was offering to discuss terms for peaceful coexistence, including technology sharing and resource allocation agreements. It was almost touching in its naivety. Prepare a response. Webb ordered. Standard Colonial Protocol 7. Any alien vessel that does not immediately withdraw beyond the system's edge will be destroyed. They have 1 hour to comply. The message was transmitted across all frequencies in the mathematical language the aliens had been using. But Webb had no intention of waiting for their response or allowing any of them to escape. The point of this battle was not just to eliminate military resistance. It was to send a message to any other civilizations that might be watching. Humanity's expansion across the galaxy would be opposed by others who possess superior technology or greater numbers. But if word spread that humans were capable of completely annihilating any species that stood in their way, future conquests would be significantly easier. All ships commenced the attack. The battle that followed would be studied by military historians for centuries afterward, not because it was particularly close or tactically complex, but because it represented the largest-scale demonstration of humanity's military philosophy in action. The opening salvo from the human fleet lit up the space around Nexus Prime like a miniature star. Hundreds of plasma cannons and missile launchers fired simultaneously, sending waves of destruction toward the alien defensive formation. The energy expenditure in those first few minutes exceeded the total annual power generation of most pre-spaceflight civilizations. The alien fleet's response was immediate and desperate. Their shield networks activated, creating interlocking barriers of energy that could deflect asteroid impacts or absorb the output of stellar flares. For a brief moment, it seemed as though their defenses might actually hold. Then, the human weapons reached their targets. Admiral Thek-Nor watched in horror as the first wave of missiles simply punched through their strongest shields as if they were soap bubbles. The overlapping barrier network that had taken months to design and implement lasted exactly 47 seconds against human firepower. All ships, scatter formation. Do not let them concentrate fire, he ordered, but it was already too late. The humans had positioned their fleet to create interlocking fields of fire that made evasive action impossible. As the alien ships broke formation, they flew directly into carefully planned kill zones where multiple human vessels could target each craft simultaneously. The Zephyrian Heavy cruiser Heart of Paradise, one of the few purpose-built warships in their fleet, managed to return fire before being destroyed. Its plasma cannon scored direct hits on a human escort vessel, but the damage was minimal. The human ship's armor absorbed the impact and continued fighting without any noticeable reduction in capability. Dr. Zurman monitored the battle from the bridge of the evacuated research vessel Infinite Curiosity, trying to gather data that might help future resistance efforts. What she discovered was even more disturbing than she had feared. "Admiral," she called out over the tactical communications network. "The humans aren't just overwhelming us through superior firepower. Their ships are designed with completely different engineering philosophies. Where we prioritize efficiency and resource conservation, they've built everything for maximum destructive capability regardless of cost." The evidence was undeniable. Human vessels carried armament that was utterly disproportionate to their size. Their power generation systems were inefficient by alien standards, but they produced enormous amounts of energy that could be directed into weapon systems. Every design choice had been made with warfare as the primary consideration. "They're not explorers who learned to fight," Dr. Zurman continued. "They're warriors who learned to travel between stars." The distinction was crucial. The Galactic Confederation had developed spaceflight technology to facilitate trade, exploration, and cultural exchange. Humans had clearly developed it to make war on a galactic scale. As the battle progressed, the one-sided nature of the engagement became increasingly apparent. The alien fleet was fighting with courage and determination, but they were essentially throwing mining equipment and passenger ships against purpose-built instruments of destruction. Within 2 hours, over half the Confederate fleet had been destroyed or disabled. The survivors were scattered across the system, unable to coordinate their remaining resistance. Several groups attempted to ram human ships in desperate suicide attacks, but even this tactic proved ineffective against superior armor and point defense systems. Admiral Theknor found himself commanding barely 300 ships from his original force of 3,000. Nexus Prime hung defenseless behind them, its population watching helplessly as their protectors were systematically annihilated. "Sir," whispered Commander Velshawn, "should we signal surrender?" Theknor considered the option, but Dr. Zurman's analysis had made it clear that surrender would only delay the inevitable. The humans had no interest in preserving alien populations, regardless of their military status. "Signal all remaining ships," he ordered. "We will not surrender to creatures that view intelligence as a crime punishable by extinction. If we must die, we die fighting." The final phase of the battle lasted another hour. The remaining Confederate ships fought with the desperate courage of those who knew they were making a last stand. They managed to inflict some damage on the human fleet. Several escort vessels were disabled, and 2 larger ships sustained minor hull breaches. But the outcome was never in doubt. One by one, the last defenders of Nexus Prime were hunted down and destroyed. Admiral Theknor died at his post when the flagship's reactor was breached by a direct hit from human railguns. Dr. Zurman survived only because her research vessel was considered a low-priority target. As she watched the final Confederate ships disappear from the tactical display, she began composing what would become the most important document in galactic history, a detailed analysis of human psychology and military capabilities that could warn other civilizations about what was coming. Fleet Admiral Webb surveyed the aftermath of the battle with professional satisfaction. The alien fleet had been completely eliminated at a cost of 7 human ships damaged and 36 personnel casualties. It had been the most efficient military operation in colonial fleet history. "Signal the ground invasion forces," he ordered. "Commence planetary pacification operations." Standard Protocol 9. Complete population processing followed by immediate colonization preparations. As the human fleet moved into orbit around Nexus Prime, the billion inhabitants below could only watch and wait for their fate to be decided by creatures who viewed their extinction as nothing more than a necessary step in humanity's expansion across the stars. The Galactic Confederation was dead. The age of human dominance had begun. From the stars came the Deathworlders 1 year after the Battle of Nexus Prime. The transformation of the core systems was nearly complete. Human colonization fleets had arrived in massive numbers, bringing with them the infrastructure needed to reshape entire worlds according to their species' requirements. The elegant spires and organic architecture of the former Confederation had been systematically demolished and replaced with the brutal efficiency of human industrial complexes. Dr. Elizabeth Harper stood in the observation dome of Research Station Alpha, overlooking what had once been the cultural capital of the Zephyrian Collective. The flowing crystal gardens and meditation pools have been replaced by massive mining operations that carved geometric scars into the planet's surface. The change was so complete that orbital surveys could barely detect that an advanced civilization had ever existed here. "The efficiency is remarkable," she noted in her personal log. "Complete planetary conversion accomplished in under 12 months. The xenological teams estimate that within 5 years, no trace of the original inhabitants will remain in the fossil record." This was the true genius of human colonization protocol. Rather than simply occupying alien worlds, they completely restructured them to match Earth normal conditions. Native ecosystems were eliminated and replaced with terrestrial species. Local geology was modified through controlled asteroid impacts and atmospheric processors. The end result was worlds that were more Earth-like than Earth itself had been before humanity's departure. But it was not just the physical transformation that impressed Dr. Harper. The psychological impact on surviving alien populations had exceeded all projections. Those few individuals who had been preserved for research purposes showed clear signs of a complete breakdown in their species' fundamental worldview. Subject designation Zeph 047, formerly Dr. Zurman, sat in the interview chamber with the defeated posture that had become common among alien survivors. Her once brilliant mind, capable of insights that had advanced Confederate science by decades, was now focused entirely on understanding how her civilization had failed so completely. The mathematical models all indicated that intelligence naturally led to cooperation, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We assumed that any species capable of interstellar travel would have evolved beyond primitive territorial behaviors. We were wrong about everything. Dr. Harper nodded sympathetically while recording every word. The alien's psychological profile provided invaluable insights into non-human thought patterns and would help design more effective pacification strategies for future conquests. Your species achieved remarkable technological advances, Harper offered. The energy generation systems you developed are superior to ours in many ways. But we never learned to fight, Zerman replied. We spent millions of years evolving past the need for violence. And when we encountered a species that had perfected it, we were defenseless. Intelligence without the will to defend, it is just another form of weakness. This was the conclusion that most surviving aliens eventually reached. Their peaceful nature, which they had viewed as the pinnacle of evolution, had actually made them vulnerable to species that retained their predatory instincts. From a human perspective, it was simply natural selection operating on a galactic scale. Doctor, interrupted Research Assistant Park through the intercom. We're receiving a priority transmission from Fleet Command. Admiral Webb is requesting an immediate conference. Harper excused herself from the interview and made her way to the communication center. The holographic image of Fleet Admiral Webb materialized above the projection platform, his expression showing a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. Doctor, I have excellent news. Deep Space Reconnaissance has confirmed the existence of 3 additional galaxy clusters within practical FTL range. Each cluster contains hundreds of star systems with clear signs of organized civilization. The implications were staggering. Humanity's expansion beyond their home galaxy had proven so successful that they were already preparing for intergalactic conquest. The resources gained from absorbing the Confederation's technology had accelerated human development by centuries. What are the initial survey results? Harper asked. Preliminary analysis suggests multiple Type II civilizations with technology levels comparable to or exceeding the Confederation. Several show signs of Dyson sphere construction and stellar engineering projects. We're looking at potential acquisition targets with resource bases that dwarf anything we've encountered so far. Harper felt a familiar thrill at the prospect of studying entirely new forms of alien intelligence. Each conquered species had provided unique insights into the possible paths of evolutionary development. The xenological database was becoming a comprehensive catalog of how intelligence could evolve under different planetary conditions. But Webb's next statement caught her completely off guard. However, there's been an unexpected development. Long-range monitoring has detected something that changes our strategic outlook completely. The Admiral's image was replaced by a star chart showing the relative positions of various galaxy clusters. Red indicators marked the locations where human scout ships had detected signs of civilization. But there was something else. Blue markers scattered throughout the map in a pattern that suggested systematic exploration. What am I looking at, Admiral? Evidence of another expansionist species. Our deep space monitors have been tracking gravitational anomalies consistent with massive fleet movements. The patterns suggest a civilization that's been systematically conquering galaxy clusters for considerably longer than we have. Harper studied the tactical display with growing unease. The blue markers formed a rough sphere centered on a galaxy cluster approximately 50,000 light-years from their current position. The expansion pattern was methodical and comprehensive, suggesting a species with military capabilities that might actually rival humanity's. Do we have any information about their technology or psychology? Limited but disturbing. Analysis of the expansion pattern indicates they've been active for at least 10,000 years. Whatever resistance they've encountered has been eliminated so completely that our sensors can't detect any remaining civilizations in their conquered territories. This was unprecedented in human experience. Every species they had encountered had been fundamentally peaceful, lacking the psychological drive necessary for sustained military conquest. The possibility that another predatory species had evolved independently was both fascinating and terrifying. Admiral, are we talking about potential competition for resources or something more serious? Webb's expression darkened. Our xenological teams believe we may be looking at another apex predator species. If their expansion continues at the current rate, direct contact is inevitable within 50 years. The strategic implications were enormous. Humanity's entire military doctrine was based on overwhelming technological and psychological superiority over peaceful species. A conflict with another warrior civilization would require completely different approaches and might result in humanity's first serious military challenge since leaving their home galaxy. What are your recommendations? Harper asked. Accelerated expansion and immediate military buildup. We need to claim as many resources as possible before potential contact. And we need to begin developing countermeasures for military technologies that might actually pose a threat to human forces. As the conference ended, Harper found herself contemplating scenarios that had seemed impossible just hours earlier. Humanity had become accustomed to viewing themselves as the galaxy's apex predators, the inevitable inheritors of all available territory and resources. The possibility that they might encounter equals, or worse, superiors, challenged their fundamental assumptions about their place in the universe. She returned to the interview chamber, where Zurman was still sitting in contemplative silence. The alien's insights into human psychology had proven surprisingly accurate, despite coming from species that had never experienced true warfare. "Doctor," Harper said, settling back in her chair, "hypothetically speaking, what would happen if humanity encountered another species with similar aggressive tendencies and military capabilities?" Zurman looked up with interest, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her depression. "Based on my observations of human behavior patterns, such a conflict would likely be absolute. Your species appears incapable of meaningful coexistence with potential rivals. But what if the other species was equally powerful? What if neither side could achieve decisive victory? Then you would have discovered the fundamental limitation of the predator strategy," Zurman replied. "When two apex predators compete for the same territory, the result is usually mutual destruction. The universe has room for only one species that views all others as obstacles to expansion." Harper realized that the alien had just identified humanity's greatest vulnerability: their psychological drive toward absolute dominance, which had made them invincible against peaceful species, might become a fatal weakness when facing another predatory civilization. Across the galaxy, long-range human scout ships were pushing deeper into unexplored space, searching for new worlds to claim and new species to catalog. But in the depths of intergalactic space, other scouts were conducting similar missions with equally ruthless efficiency. The collision between two expanding civilizations, each convinced of their own superiority and incapable of compromise, was becoming inevitable. The galaxy that had known peace for millions of years was about to become the battleground for the most destructive war in cosmic history. As humanity continued its expansion, absorbing worlds and eliminating civilizations with mechanical efficiency, they remained unaware that they were racing toward a confrontation that would test everything they believed about their place in the universe. The age of easy conquest was ending, and the real war for galactic dominance was about to begin. The Deathworlders had found their match, and the stars themselves would burn before either side would yield to the other. In the vast cosmos, there was room for only one apex predator species, and the universe was about to discover which civilization had earned that title through blood, conquest, and an absolute refusal to accept anything less than total domination. The final test of humanity's predatory evolution was approaching, and the outcome would determine not just the fate of two species, but the future of intelligence itself in their corner of the cosmos.